And welcome back. Russian President Vladimir Putin hitting the slopes in Sochi today ahead of next month's Olympics, just days after vowing to annihilate terrorists threatening to attack the Winter Games. He was joined by Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev at a ski resort near the Olympic skiing venues. Now, this follows twin suicide bombings in the Russian city of Volgograd, about 400 miles northeast of Sochi.
Russia, in the meantime, is still sheltering U.S. fugitive and NSA leaker Edward Snowden. He was the topic of a New York Times editorial yesterday that called for him to be granted clemency, a pardon in essence, because of the value, allegedly, of what he has revealed about U.S. government spying. The editorial saying Snowden proved government officials have, quote, this is a quote, routinely and deliberately broken the law, a claim that reportedly has federal officials pretty angry. Doug Burns joins us. Former prosecutor Doug Wohl is a defense attorney. You know, I read Judge, the federal judge in New York.
Judge Pauly.
Yeah, Judge Pauly's decision.
Right.
And he says that there's no right to privacy when you provide information to a third party, which is a telephone company. Isn't he right about that, Doug?
I think he is. I mean, this is quite a political dust-up at this point. This New York Times editorial was very interesting, and I would, sign on board with the idea of it 100%, which essentially is somebody may have done a criminal offense, but then there are those who argue that it's in the larger public good. But back to your point, two federal judges apparently have granted interim relief saying that the program may violate the law. Judge Pauly flat out said it does not violate the law. So I think the problem with the Times editorial is the language you just read, Greg, which says that it is illegal. I mean, I'm not so sure that's correct.
Yeah, Doug, thanks very much. David, what do you think?
Well, you know, the judge in D.C., I think, had it right, Greg, and that's who the Times relied on. And, of course, adding salt into the wound in this Times editorials, they generally, the New York Times, serve as the White House's media PR firm. So that's got to add salt in the wound.
Right.
But, yeah, I kind of, look, the Times indicates that this program, the NSA's program, violated a particular federal privacy law thousands of times a year, and that's what the judge in D.C. found. I got to believe there's some strength in that. Look, we all know this will end up before the U.S. Supreme Court, and there's going to be some kind of compromise reached in it. But the idea that the administration intentionally went out and violated the law.
Right.
Look, Greg, this is the administration that
Doug,
was knee-deep in Benghazi.
Is there irony in this, Doug?
The Tea Party
that here you've got
so
a guy. Here you've got a guy. He didn't even graduate from college.
Right.
Who claims that the NSA has violated the Constitution, and yet Edward Snowden, there he is. There's a picture of him.
Yep.
He's a guy who thumbs his nose at the Constitution and its establishment, of course, of a criminal justice system. He's fled the criminal justice system.
Well, here's a guy who causes, academic elites at one party raising their glasses and saying the man's a hero, and then other academic intelligentsia elites saying he's a criminal. So it's really quite a conundrum. And everybody's got their competing arguments. But the reality is that he did technically commit a crime. There's no question about that, in my opinion.
Right. He's not a whistleblower.
Exactly.
You look up the statute on whistleblowers.
Exactly.
He's not a whistleblower. I want to go to somebody else, Lynn Stewart. I've interviewed her over the years.
Sure.
She represented the blind sheikh who aided in the first terrorist attacks at the World Trade Center. She's now been released because she's dying.
Yes.
Is that the right, David, let me go to you on this. Is that the right decision?
Well, Greg, apparently the diagnosis is she's got breast cancer and she has approximately 18 months to live. But remember what she did.
Yes.
I mean, in 2000, she's retained by the blind sheikh, and she actually takes information from the blind sheikh, passes it along to a terrorist group. It's much more involved than we have time to get into. But she's convicted of providing material information to a terrorist group, essentially aiding and abetting an Islamic terrorist group, and sort of providing them or prompting them to attack Egypt. Now, she was convicted of 2010 and given 10 years in federal prison, which means her release date is 2018. I don't know, man. I mean, this is a tough one. I got to say that if there were somebody who should be denied, that maybe this is the one.
Quick one from you, because we're out of time.
Yeah, this has a backstory, Greg, which was that she got 28 months originally and proclaimed to the judge, quote, "I could do this standing on my head." So the Second Circuit remanded it back, and the judge said, "Oh, really?" and gave her 10 years. As far as the early medical release, it's very rare. You don't see it very often. But in point of fact, if somebody is dying, they can grant it.
I mean, you feel badly, and I've interviewed her over the years, and she has no remorse for helping terrorists.
That's right.
She really doesn't. She does. I mean, I've asked her point blank, and she has no remorse. It's unbelievable. Doug, David, Happy New Year's, guys. Thanks.
You too, Greg.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
From rescuer to rescuee, another dramatic